Back in 2021, UFOs were all over the news. Headlines boasted that you could now read the CIA's entire collection of UFO documents online, like approximately almost 3,000 pages of these documents detailing the government entity's findings on UFOs were made available for anybody to read and download thanks to a Freedom of Information Act filing being granted. Well folks, I'm here today to talk about the stories over the years that have proved the government knows that there's something in those skies, be it UFO, alien, or unknown. For starters, back in 2023, so just last year, 3 military veterans testified in Congress's highly anticipated hearing on UFOs, including a former Air Force intelligence officer who claimed the US government had operated a secret multi-decade reverse engineering program of recovered vessels. He also mentioned that the US had recovered non-human biologics from alleged crash sites. Mainly there were calls to remove the stigma for aviators who report UFO sightings and to ensure oversight of government programs that investigate them. Retired Major David Grush, who went from being a part of the Pentagon's UAP, another word for UFO, task force to becoming a whistleblower, told the House Oversight Committee's National Security Subcommittee that he had been denied access to some government UFO programs, but that he knows the exact locations of those that are in the US possession. In response to public interest and political pressure, federal and military agencies have shared a trove of information about unexplained aircraft encounters. Grush also alleged that the US has retrieved, like I said before, non-human biological matter from the pilots of the crafts, adding that was the assessment of people with direct knowledge on the program that he talked to, that are currently still on the program. While he refrained from sharing any further information in the public hearing, he did offer to disclose details behind closed doors. He said he hasn't personally seen any alien vehicles or bodies, but his opinions are based on the accounts of over 40 witnesses he interviewed over 4 years in his role with the task force. He's like, look, my testimony is based on information I've been given by folks with a long-standing track record of legitimacy and service to the country. A lot of them who shared compelling evidence in the form of photography, official documentation, and classified testimony. He also mentioned that that trove of evidence has intentionally been kept secret from Congress. He mentioned to the panel that he and not one, not two, but several other colleagues have been the targets of administrative hell, and that he's feared for his life since coming forward. He's just like, it's brutal, it's very unfortunate, and a lot of the tactics used to hurt him professionally and personally kinda sucked. Now, there is an open investigation into the matter. The subcommittee also heard testimony from former Navy fighter pilot Ryan Graves and retired Commander David Fravor about their alleged encounters with aircrafts of an unknown origin. Graves recounted an incident with a flying object off of the coast of Virginia Beach in 2014. While flying an F-18, he said he came upon an aircraft that looked like a dark gray or black cube inside of a clear sphere that he estimated to be 5 to 15 feet in diameter and unlike anything he's ever seen. He claimed that this UFO could remain stationary despite hurricane force winds. He told folks that his squadron submitted a safety report, but they got no official acknowledgement of the incident. Also, according to him, UFO encounters in that region weren't exactly rare or isolated. Now, he has since founded Americans for Safe Aerospace, a group that supports aviators who have reported UFOs. He said that the objects that are reportedly being seen by military and commercial pilots are performing maneuvers that are unexplainable due to our current understanding of our technology and our capabilities. He's like, if everybody could see what he saw, our national conversation would change. Project Magnet was a UFO study program established by Transport Canada in December of 1950 under the direction of Wilbert Brockhouse-Smith, senior radio engineer for Transport Canada's Broadcast and Measurement section. He made a request to use the facilities of the Department of Transport to study UFOs, and it was formally approved on December 2nd of 1950 with the intention to collect data about UFOs and apply any recovered data to practical engineering and technology. The ultimate goal of the project was to apply any findings on the subject of geomagnetism to the possibility of exploiting Earth's magnetic field as a source of propulsion for vehicles. Now, he and his colleagues in the government believed that UFOs might hold a key to this new source of power, which, it was a small-scale undertaking. It used those facilities, and it did have some assistance from personnel at the Defense Research Board and the National Research Council. In June of 1952, Smith issued a preliminary report arguing that UFOs likely came from intelligent extraterrestrial sources and almost certainly manipulated magnetism for flight. And he reiterated it again in a report in 1953. Also back to 1952, I think it was April, the Canadian government established Project Second Story, a parallel UFO research project with Smith also involved. Now, this consisted of a group of scientists and military officers who met periodically to consider the UFO question and to recommend government action. Smith reported to Second Story on some of Project Magnet's findings and conclusions. He believed that UFOs were linked to psychic phenomena and believed himself to be in contact with extraterrestrial beings who communicated with him through telepathy, which not uncommon for aliens. He wrote a number of articles for Topside, the publication of the Ottawa New Sciences Club, which he founded, outlining the philosophy of the Space Brothers. These are the folks folks who we claim to be in contact with. They were later collected and they were published posthumously in 1969 under the title The Boys from Topside. Now back to 1952, in October, Smith set up an observatory at Shirley's Bay outside of Ottawa to study reports of UFO sightings, believing that UFOs would emit physical characteristics that could be measured. A number of sighting reports were investigated by Project Magnet, but in 1954 the project was shut down. But Smith was allowed to use the facilities with his own funding and did so until he passed in 1962. John Kirkpatrick is a physicist and former intelligence official who, until last December, headed the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office. You know, the Pentagon office that Congress was like, you, find me answers. He recently published an op-ed in Scientific American called Here's What I Learned as the US Government's UFO Hunter. So, I'd consider that a pretty good thing to read. He mentioned on a podcast that Congress really gave the office two main missions. There was an operational mission, which was to investigate contemporary sightings with military pilots, operators, and sensors to kind of understand what's happening in our domain. And the second was a historical mission, which was to look at everything the United States government has done on aliens, UFOs. We're talking going back to 1945, as well as investigate all these hidden programs that the government's been keeping from Congress. All the ones that investigate UFOs or reverse engineer things. Yeah, let's look into that. So in that historical mission, anybody who had previously signed non-disclosure agreements that protected classified information, they were allowed to come in if they thought they had something that was helpful. Why? Well, to tell the office, so the office could investigate. The group had access to the National Archives, they had all military service archives, they had crazy stuff, all the NASA stuff. They would go so far back and be like, hey, you named something? Yeah, what was that? What was it? How did that relate to this? Document everything, track it down. So, obviously, a lot of programs got named, and they're all classified, but apparently the guys working on this, they found everything, reported it all back up to Congress, so when are we getting those details? Please? We all know the Roswell hullabaloo, but if we break down all the government coverage about that chaos, it proves they're hiding something. So, a report released in 1994 concluded that the material recovered in 1947 was likely, keyword here, debris from Project Mogul, a military surveillance program employing high-altitude balloons and classified portions of an unclassified New York University project by atmospheric researchers. A scholarly consensus emerged concluding that the military had decided to conceal the true purpose of the crash device, which was allegedly nuclear test monitoring. And instead they're like, hey everybody, it's a weather balloon. Now this balloon had allegedly been launched from a different Army airfield a month earlier, and it was carrying a radar reflector and classified sensors for experimental monitoring of testing. Now, these Air Force reports were dismissed by experts because it's kind of implausible. Now look, at the end of the day, let's try and count how many times the government changed their tale. And they expected us to believe them every time? Because for me, it screams scrambling to cover up aliens. Okay, I know, you need more information. Well, how about this? Let's consult Edgar Mitchell. An Apollo astronaut, passed away in 2018, and he had a lot of theories about aliens that he shared with the public. He believed they were very much real, and that UFOs have visited us before, publicly stating that he thought there was a cover-up involving aliens and their visits to Earth. As the sixth man to walk on the moon and a NASA astronaut, his theories and beliefs are among the most credible of UFO believers. So when he started speaking out in the 90s, he said, I'm only coming out now with this knowledge because I don't want to be labeled a UFO crank. But he stood by his beliefs no matter how much he was criticized. In an interview in 1996, he said there were alien bodies at Roswell, but the government covered it up. In 1998, he called on Washington, D.C. to acknowledge publicly what it knew about alien life. He said he had witnesses he knew personally from intelligence agencies and the military who convinced him the government had been covering up UFOs for 50 years, including Roswell. 2008, he was interviewed and he talked about how this was real and aliens have contacted humans multiple times. Now, interestingly, his beliefs were in line with those of Philip James Corso, who was chief of U.S. Counterintelligence Corps in Rome in the 1940s and the Pentagon's Foreign Technology Desk in the 60s, who wrote a book the day after Roswell, where he also said that he moved alien artifacts from the Roswell crash, which were later reverse engineered to develop more of our advanced technology. Look, I could go on and on for ages. And finally, today, J. Allen Hynek was initially a skeptic of flying saucers and came to believe over the course of the top secret project that he was on that serious investigation of UFOs was a legitimate scientific endeavor. He acted as scientific advisor to UFO studies undertaken by the US Air Force under 3 projects: Project Sign, Project Grudge, and the very famous Project Blue Book. He studied UFO reports and decided whether the phenomena described therein suggested known astronomical projects. So when he was originally hired, he was skeptical. He was like, okay, all these reports are made by unreliable witnesses, or you've misidentified something that already exists. He's like, oh, it's all ridiculous, and it's a fad that's gonna pass. So let's just fast forward a little bit. 1953, he's now an associate member of the the Robertson panel, which concluded that, well, I don't know, maybe we should take a PR campaign to debunk the subject. He would later, regret his decision because apparently that panel helped make UFOs a disreputable field of study. So let's fast forward. 1969, Project Blue Book is shuttered, and Hynek was one of the few people who conceded that some UFO cases could simply defy explanation. So today he's known as the father of ufology, who coined the phrase close encounter. Now, 1985, people are like, okay, it was an interview, they were asking him, why'd you change your mind? He's like, well, there was two things. One was the completely negative and unyielding attitude of the Air Force, because they wouldn't give UFOs the chance of existing, even if they were flying up and down the street in broad daylight. He began to resent the whole everything had to have an explanation, because at first he was like, okay, yeah, but then he's like, no, you can't assume everything's just the way it is. Also, the caliber of witnesses was troubling him. A lot of them were military pilots, and he's like, maybe there is something to all this after all. And that's it for me once again, folks. I've been Alexa, the resident Ookie Spooky Gurgly. See y'all next time, you lovely spooky people.